Hey, it's Tawana with a biblical understanding of American politics, a Destiny Education production. Today, we're going to talk about my favorite aspect of the American government. But before I tell you what it is, I want to make sure you understand what you have. Because for some of you, the moment I tell you what this organization is, you're going to sit back and go, oh, that's not. But the only reason you will say that is because you truly do not understand what the gift is that exists within this particular organization within the United States government. So let's get started. This group started in 1692 when Thomas Neal was granted a patent and it this allowed to establish this group in North America under British control. In 1775, during the Second Continental Congress, Benjamin Franklin was appointed the head of this particular division, ensuring that this division was able to access and work with everyone in the United States. This is the one and only organization that has never had a problem dealing with people of all backgrounds, of all colors, of all creeds, of everything. This group of people is the hardest working people within the United States government. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. You will see them within various communities. But what most of you don't know is that prior to recent times, it used to operate 7 full days every week. It ensured that grandparents got to see the birth of their new grandchild. It ensured that children and family members got to know when others that they loved arrived in different locations. This organization has been the most impactful organization in this country since and before its official inception. This group deals with 425 million pieces of information every single day. And around Christmas, it deals with 2 billion pieces of information. The group I'm talking about is the United States Postal Service. It is hands down the most efficient and effective group that exists within the United States of America. It is the one organization that manages to keep all of us in contact and in touch. It allows us to make sure that when our loved ones are a distance away, we can get information to them that cannot transmit electronically. Because remember, while today we have what's called email, originally there was no such thing. The United States Postal Service existed long before the internet, telephones, cars, trains. It was stagecoaches that went across this country. But I want to give you another highly impressive piece of information, and that is that in 1887, the United States Postal Service began working with Switzerland to create an international arm of the post office. You see, the post office has played a huge role in our country, and there's no one in this world who has not experienced what it's like to receive mail, packages, anything. Every house receives information. Every group has the opportunity to send and receive because of this organization. What I want you to understand and why it's so important that we talk about this today is because the United States Postal Service is written into the US Constitution. It falls under Article 1, Section 8, Clause number 7, which states the Congress shall have the power to establish the post offices and post roads. Now, many of you won't understand what a post road is, so let me explain that to you. The world that you see today obviously didn't exist from the beginning. And so the roads that got us to and from where we needed to go had to be created. In order to do that, it meant that the post office had to utilize surveyors and other groups of people to make sure that they could efficiently get mail from one location to another, regardless of the weather. It is hands down the greatest gift that we have in the United States. But there's many things that a lot of you don't understand about the post office. First and foremost, that the post office is a community service offered to us. It is written within its documentation that it must be able to sustain itself. And according to the Postal Reorganization Act of 1970, the U.S. Post Office Department, which is what it was originally called, was turned into the United States Postal Service and was required to be self sustaining. You see, a lot of people think that the post office has always been broke and that it's always been financially struggling, but that actually is not factual. The US Postal Service has always been able to pay its bills, it's always been able to sustain itself. What many of you are unaware is that the Postal Service was required to hold 10 years worth of salary for each employee that it has. No other organization in the world has had such unreasonable expectations. There's never been a time that the post office couldn't sustain itself. The reason that this is so important is because while so many of us, including our organization, talk about the racial implications of Project 2025, what we don't talk about are the everyday implications of Project 2025. You see, the termination of the Constitution, which was threatened by Donald Trump. So, for those of you who are unaware, let me show you real quick what 45 actually said about the Constitution in his own words. What we don't often understand or remember about the founding fathers is that the January 6th events would have been considered treason, and anybody who participated in that would have been put up for death. Not sedition, it would have been treason. So, that statement is untrue. But what terminating the Constitution does is it allows for the post office to be overtaken. And many of you may or may not know that during the time of 45, a man by the name of Louis DeJoy was put in charge as the Postmaster General of the United States Postal Service. DeJoy has a disdain for the post office because the post office technically acts as competition for companies that are logistical, at least for those who don't understand the value of it. And so, as the new leader of this organization, he has diligently worked to dismantle the Postal Service, slowing down mail. And many of you will have seen that over the last 4 years. I know that from here in the Midwest to the West Coast, it used to take 2 to 3 days for a single first class mail. That means an envelope with one stamp on it to get from the Midwest to the West Coast. You're now lucky if it gets there within 6 days. What has been done to the post office is criminal. And according to Project 2025, the writers and authors, the Heritage Foundation, has the drive to dismantle the Postal Service. And here's what that means to you: it means that you will no longer have reasonably priced first class mail. So, whereas right now, under DeJoy's leadership, it has been determined that the cost of a stamp needs to be 60 cents or so. Okay. But if it were allowed to be privatized, it would mean that a letter would cost you somewhere in the ballpark of $3 to $5 to send, because that's how privatization works. It increases the cost. You see, you terminate the Constitution, and now nothing that we utilize on a daily basis is safe anymore. So here's what I want you to understand. And I want you to know that I'm a huge proponent for the United States Postal Service. Huge. I love the post office. It is hands down the most efficient system. As a matter of fact, it is such an efficient system that in 1907, UPS was modeled and designed right after the post office. The owners of UPS mastered their schedules. They understood how they worked, in what ways they worked, and they were able to mimic it, duplicate it, so that they could then in turn create a system that could deliver packages regardless of the weather system. In fact, many of you would be surprised to know that if you need to send a package from either the West Coast or the East Coast to the Midwest, especially during the winter, UPS is the way to go, because it doesn't matter how bad those roads are. UPS always manages to get paperwork where it needs to be. I want you to understand this, and I want you to understand this so much so that I will put entire document about the USPS on our Project 2025 website. And the reason that I'll do that is because I want you to take time to educate yourself about what the post office actually does. See, many of us say, oh, well, they always lose my mail, they're always slow. Let me remind you of something. 425 pieces of mail they deal with in off season per day. Not a week, not a month, every single day. 425 million pieces of mail. And they lose less than 1% of that mail. They are hands down the most efficient. I know when you're part of that 1%, that less than 1%, it's very inconvenient. But when you're not, you get to watch the USPS work like the charm it's designed to be. So here's what I want you to understand, because there are things that if you are allowed to terminate the Constitution, which is what the Conservative Party is wanting to do under Project 2025, not only will you not get your bills, not only will they not get paid, not only will all these things come to pass, but there are some other things that we need to look at, because the United States Postal Service keeps this country and this world working throughout all the different aspects of life. It makes sure that you can communicate with whomever you need to at whatever time you need to communicate. But in order to keep it, but in order to keep it where it is, the Constitution has to stay in place. So let's talk about what happens if the United States Postal Service were to be shut down or dismantled as is proposed in Project 2025. And if you go to our website, you can download the book, type in mail or mailing, and that's how you will find it. It will show you 27 different locations so that you know what Project 2025 wants to do with the mail under multiple situations. So, number one, private carriers will take over the market. With private carriers taking over the market, you will no longer get your mail on days when it's super cold, days when the weather is bad. They will not be there to deliver your mail. It will be inconsistent. Monday through Saturday will no longer be the days that you see mail. You'll pay higher cost. Having it privatized, as I explained earlier, will increase your cost. As it stands right now, USPS has what's called the Universal Service Obligation. And what that does is it makes sure that you have to stay within a certain price range for stamps and uh, mailing opportunities. Going to the post office and picking up free things to mail, like boxes and things like that, will no longer exist. Rural and underserved communities, so little towns in the Midwest, will suddenly find that they no longer have access to their mail. Their bills will constantly be late. Anybody who is not in a metropolitan city will see the greatest impact on your entire life. Information that needs to get to you won't get to you, and important dates that you need to make will no longer be available to you. You'll have increased delivery fees. Yeah. You think 66 cents is bad? Imagine paying $3 to $5 for a stamp. You'll have disruption to e commerce and small businesses. You see, the USPS is often more price efficient than UPS or FedEx. And so not having them means that if you have a small online business where you ship things, your cost to ship is going to go higher. And while you will send that over, while you will pass that on to your client, what also is going to happen is that now clients need to reevaluate whether or not they can afford to ship or buy from you because they don't want to have to pay the shipping. You'll have slower delivery times. Without USPS's extensive infrastructure, there will be delays in shipping time affecting e commerce and your ability to meet customer expectations for quick deliveries. You'll have an impact on mail in voting and government services because they won't be able to reach you. You'll have election challenges when it comes to absentee voting because there will no longer be consistency in the postmarking. You see, the postmark is oftentimes what people work off of. As long as you have it postmarked by a certain date, they will accept it. You'll find delays in government service, social security checks, tax documents, census materials, and other essential government services. You will have great disruptions. You'll have loss of the universal service obligation, which means you won't have uniform rates anymore. All stamps will not be created equal, and all packaging and mailings will not be created equal. They will all have different pricing, drastically different pricing. So if it costs you $8.95 to mail a bubble envelope now, it will suddenly be based off of what zone it's going into. You see, that's the thing I want you to understand. For me to ship something from the in the within the US, it's the same cost. For you to ship something within the US, it's the same cost. But now what you'll be looking at is a change in shipping costs just within this country. We're not even talking about how it will impact international rates, just US rates. So if you're from the Midwest and you're shipping out to the West, to the East, to the South, they will each have a different price point based on how far away they are in comparison to you. Diminished accessibilities. Those of you who rely on low cost first class mail for communication are often going to be priced out of the ability to be serviced. You won't be able to afford it. Extreme job loss. Over 600,000 people will be laid off because the USPS employs a huge number of people. Impact on the local economies. Um, yeah, it will kill their supply chain, their customer outreach, daily operations, especially if you're in a small town or a rural area and USPS is the most efficient thing that you have to work with. Disruption in medication delivery, so you won't be able to count on when your medicine is going to be there. This is what happens when you remove the post office from our situation, from our life circumstance. The USPS was designed for each and every one of us. It was designed for you to ensure you could have the best life and continue to move forward and still be able to maintain relationships with your family members, your friends, whoever it was you needed to talk to. When you are talking about Christmas, for example, the United States Postal Service moves over 2 billion pieces of mail per day total. That's 500 million pieces of mail and over 28 million packages. The rest of that number is made up in all sorts of other things that the US Postal Service does. It's a huge number that all work together to make sure you can accomplish whatever it is you're setting forth to do. So, while we're looking to November 5th and we are within 20 some odd days, 26 days until election, there's something I want you to think about. Imagine your life without the United States Postal Service. Imagine not having the option to reach out to someone from by via mail because that option is no longer available. These are the dangers of anyone who talks about terminating our Constitution. The Constitution gives us a lot of freedoms. It's what makes America great. It's not removing the Constitution. It's not getting rid of articles and amendments. It's ensuring that the foundation of this country, that this country was built on. And I want to remind you that before this country was, the United States Postal Service was. It was being developed and becoming the efficient system that it is long before that Declaration of Independence or the Constitution were signed by almost 100 years. These are the things that you're looking at taking away. And these are the things that you will lose access to. Now, I want you to understand one last thing before I sign off. The MAGA group, those that are diehard Trumpers, they're too far gone. They will not hear anything until the hardship hits them. I'm talking to you who's still sitting on the fence. This is not a policy election. This is an election of, do I want the Constitution in place or don't I? If you aren't willing to make excuses for other people in your life, then don't make excuses for a man you don't know. Don't make excuses for a man who aligns himself with people who originate from different countries where apartheid ran rampant. Elon Musk was 17 when he left South Africa. His family would have taken him away. Elon Musk and his family ran because Nelson Mandela took over as leader. Kamala Harris is more than qualified to do the job. Don't vote for her just because she's a woman. Don't vote for her just because she's not Trump. Understand that she is qualified to do the job. It's not about her race, it's not about her color. It's about, is she capable of doing this job, or do I really want to turn my country over to someone who doesn't love it? When we are looking at destroying this country, when we are looking at cutting out services that are put in place so that all of us can be successful, we've got a much bigger problem. The United States Postal Service is a staple of every community. It's the central hub. It's where small town America goes to get their mail, because many of them live so far outside of town that it's not on their rural route. We have to look out for one another when sometimes we're too far out of our minds to be able to look out for ourselves. When we're too caught up in things, this is your opportunity to pay closer attention to your fellow man. And that's exactly what the Bible asks us to do. We have to take care of our brother. And doing that means that when our brother is wrong, we let them be wrong and learn the hard way, but we still protect them from themselves where we can. Voting blue down the ballot this election saves that post office. And I propose that during the next 4 years, we all come together and figure out how to create a party that is truly for America, all the people of America, and all the invaluable services of America. If you love this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. I'll see you next week.